All right. We are back with another installment of Accepting the Challenges. Now, today's guest is one that I think, to be honest, you don't even have to be a teacher, I think, to appreciate this story, to appreciate this journey of the gentleman that we're going to talk to today. And that is, I'm gonna call him by his official Colonel Fred Johnson. He is retired military. I'm going to let him share a little bit about that and introduce himself. So, Fred, go ahead and introduce yourself and a little bit of backstory and maybe a summary of your journey and kind of where you started and where you're at now.
Well, absolutely. Hey, Shane, thank you very much, not only for having me on here on your show, but what you're doing with accepting the challenge. And I think that's your work is very important work, not only for us individually, but for us as a community and us as a world. So I'm really excited just to be a part of this. So thank you. But I did put my title up here, Colonel Fred Johnson, because I spent 30 years in the military, and a lot of who I am as a human being, as a person, is connected with my military past 30 years. I deployed 4 times to war, Iraq twice, Afghanistan, Bosnia, also Honduras, and some other things. I did some other things. But so again, thank you for using my title, and I appreciate that. I'm from Southern Illinois, about 3 hours from here. Grew up in a town called Centralia, Illinois. The winningest basketball team, high school basketball team in the nation.
So I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
Okay,
and
cool.
I do apologize. So I have family on my dad's side from Centralia. So they used to have their family reunion there on Carlisle Lake to go around. So Wittenbrinks is my grandmother's last name. Now they've obviously, her sister who had a lake house there, they had a house on the lake and they had a big clubhouse. So the whole family would come in, all the kids would go and pile in the clubhouse. And the other thing that I'm also not as much here lately because I'm trying to cut back on some things, but the other thing that I know Centralia is definitely popular for is Country Bob's sauce that you put on. So if you're familiar with it, you live in the South and you're familiar with Country Bob's, it's kind of a all in one. You can go on burgers, steak.
I love Country Bob. Grew up on Country Bob's.
Absolutely. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but there may be a lineage. So my grandmother actually, her family, a lot of her family is from down around Steelville and Chester. Actually, and I may miss part of some of this might not be 100% factual, but based on the knowledge and conversations that I had before people passed away, one of my great grandparents either owned or worked at the bar where Popeye and all of those people existed. So a lot of people don't know that the gentleman who started the cartoon Popeye, he was essentially drawing the cartoons on the wall of people in town. So the characters in Popeye were people in town, and he was drawing the cartoon and that kind of thing. So
and I think it was Chester. I can't remember, but I heard Chester was where Popeye had grown up. But Southern Illinois that you're talking about, and that's kind of what I was getting with is almost another state within a state. It's totally it's a whole different culture. But so I grew up there, and I was a basketball player. You had to be a basketball player in Centralia, so I was very fortunate. I got a basketball scholarship. I went to a small school in South Carolina, Spartanburg, South Carolina. Played basketball there, and then had to decide what I was going to do when I got out, and joined ROTC, and I became a infantry officer. Went through airborne, ranger, all that. Served in mostly light infantry units. Carried a lot of rucksacks. And just, very fortunate and blessed to serve with a lot of great people. And I made the rank of colonel whenever I finally retired. And since retirement, I spent a lot of time working with nonprofits, raising money as a fundraiser. And then finally, I decided I was going to try to get back kind of connected with the military, and decided to become a military contractor, worked with a very large military contracting company. Then found out that JCPS, Jefferson Community Public Schools, was short teachers, and I'd always wanted to be a teacher, and we can talk about that.
Sure.
So I said, I wish I could be a teacher. I said, I wish I could help out. This military contracting thing was, and a buddy emailed me on Facebook, or Facebook me, and said, hey, dude, there's this way you can become a teacher using your military experience and your education, and you ought to look it up. And sure enough, I did. Found out that I could get my certification in a single day. And I know teachers who were going through the certification process are saying, oh man, that's wrong. But I did, got hired at Thomas Jefferson Middle School, quit my job as a military contractor, and was teaching in the classroom 6th grade social studies at Thomas Jefferson Middle School Patriots a week later. Wow. It was crazy. So
a fitting nickname for the school, coming from where from your service. And thank you for your service, by the way, as well. And I addressed you by Colonel because you've earned that title. So it's one that you've earned. So out of respect, it was the proper thing to do. So so you also now, since you've been a teacher, did the book. So you have a book, right?
Yes.
It is The 5 Wars.
Yeah, it's I got it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I've got this is my first book. I've actually written 2, and I'm working on a novel now. But this is 5 Wars: A Soldier's Journey to Peace.
Okay.
What it is I wrote that very close to my retirement. I left the Army. I'll just be frank and transparent. I left the Army not on really great terms. I'll be honest. I did some messed up things. The book is about my journey, not only the 4 wars that I participated in, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia, but the 5th war was the one that was the closest to killing me, and that was my 5th war, and that was dealing with PTSD and more moral injury than anything else. When I was in Iraq, we were going on a mission, and a company commander came up to me and said, hey, sir, I don't feel good about this mission because we haven't had enough intelligence on it. I think we should postpone it. I said, hey, no, we got to do this raid. You've got to clear this route, and we got to roll. And he finally said, okay, I'll obey the order. Well, during that operation, a soldier, Sergeant Freeman Gardner, 26-year-old newlywed from Little Rock, Arkansas, was in the vehicle. And I knew Freeman from, some just being in the organization and everything. Yep. And they didn't have enough people to pull security. So he said, hey, I'll pull security. He got out of the vehicle, set up, and a improvised explosive device, IED, blew up and killed him instantly. So, we brought his body back and prepared him, to return him home. And as is our custom, we all gathered around to say goodbye. And so I was looking down at Freeman's body, and they had really fixed him up. All I noticed was there was this little scar above his head. And, I bent down to kiss his forehead. And when I looked up, I saw the face of that company commander. And in my mind, I said to myself, I caused this. If I just listened to that company commander. And then, we sent Freeman home to his mom, and I wrote a letter home to his mother, Farrah Ratcliffe. She was in Little Rock, saying, hey, what happened? What a great soldier she was. And, I sent the letter off, and that's what you do. And I never thought about it. But a month later, I get a letter on my desk, and it's from Farrah Ratcliffe. And I said, no, I don't even want to open this. So I open it and I read it, and she thanks me for being Freeman's leader, and I'm saying, my gosh, I'm just ashamed. Yeah. And, I put the letter down, shut my door, and I cried for a long time. And that just haunted me. And eventually what happened is I got to a point near the end of my career where I contemplated suicide. I went out, I got drunk, and I was going to drive my vehicle into the Ohio River. And thank God a police officer was doing his job. He pulled me over, put me in jail, and saved my life. And then at that point, I said, I got to get changed. And so the book is about that journey and about, what led to that journey. Sorry, that was a long dive.
No. It's yeah. I think, it's a very real story. And, I think a lot of that ties into probably even what you do today, because I don't think, outside as teachers, and our main audience with this is teachers, but outside of that, um, I don't think that the normal person is aware of the vast amount of trauma that a lot of these young people are dealing with. And so I'll give you a little bit of backstory on me. So I come from very, very humble beginnings. I moved 17 times the first 18 years of my life. I dealt with, verbal abuse and mental abuse and physical abuse as a kid. I was ADHD, barely graduated high school, all these different things. And, when you know this obviously now, but when you survive trauma, I don't like to say suffer. When you survive trauma, it almost becomes like a I don't like a sixth sense or a superpower. Like you can see it on other people. I mean, it's like a light that shines off of somebody who's hurting. So I can imagine that you see this, especially in middle school. I mean, you're dealing with that transition from a little kid to a young adult, in the early stages. And I would imagine you're seeing that, on a regular basis, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And the school that I teach at is a accelerated improvement school. And our population are kids that, and it varies, but a lot of the kids are starting out at a low performance, but has the ability for a lot of growth. The school that I teach at is 76% students of color, 30 different languages are spoken there. So, we go into the classroom every day, and the teachers that will listen to us know trauma informed, that every encounter you have, there's a potential that student had some sort of trauma. So that's exactly, Shane, what you're saying is exactly accurate.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and that's a thing that, so you literally are waking up every day and going into work and accepting the challenge because, it's, even in today's time, I come from a family of teachers. My wife is, she's currently a special education teacher in the middle school, here where we're at. And, it's very frustrating for me to see a lot of the comments right now that are on social media and publicly about schools and, saying different things about kids or parents, or not parents, but teachers. Oh, well, they're just being lazy, or they're like, and I know a lot of teachers. I don't know one teacher that doesn't want to be in the classroom.
I'm telling you.
Right? But they want to be safe. They want to know, there's a real concern. And it's unfortunate that teachers really kind of have to take a back seat. They're never really the first ones that people think of, or the first ones that people make a decision based off of. So the fact that, you and your colleagues there are literally waking up, and going into a school like that, to help that type of demographic. I think it's massive. I'll also give, whoever it is that hired you, and I don't know you outside of this conversation and doing some research on you, but whoever hired you and brought you into that type of school, they knew what they were doing, because I would imagine, while social studies is what you teach, I would imagine some of the biggest lessons and impacts that you've made have had nothing to do with social studies whatsoever.
Well, I appreciate that comment. And the person that brought me in was our principal, Kimberly Gregory, who told me, whenever she interviewed me, and like I said, I got this opportunity. Thomas Jefferson was the first school I interviewed with. It was the kind of school that I wanted to teach with. And she looked at me during the interview, and she says, Colonel Johnson, she called me Colonel Johnson. I was very respectful. And she says, hey, if you're going to do this, you have to be all in. And we understand if that's not where you're at, but understand if you're going to come to Thomas Jefferson and be a patriot, you have to be all in. And that's the kind of leader she is. And that's, and I see that throughout my encounters in education. Because like all of us, I was, I stand on the shoulders of my teachers, and I always wanted to be one. And that's why I am a teacher now. But I had no idea when these people when people are saying teachers are lazy, and I had no idea. A lot of folks say, I'll just say it. I served 30 years. I'm 3, 4 Bronze Star for Valor. I am more proud and I feel more honored being a teacher than I did as a soldier.
That's awesome.
And yeah, and so I tell people, I said, teaching school is not like combat, but it's harder than combat. Yeah. And we can talk about that all day long, but folks that have not picked up that dry eraser and stood in front of 30, 11-year-olds who just want to do the best they can, got no clue what's going on. Yeah. I'm just saying that. I only done this for a year.
Sure. But, and they don't know, like, when the kid walks up to you and, I think a lot of times, people, they hear about kids acting out, or, the reality of it is kids aren't jerks just to be jerks. And really that kind of translates into the workforce, right? No one comes to work. Exactly. No one showed up on base, when it was time to muster up. No one was just being a jerk just to be a jerk. A lot of times they had something going on that they were dealing with. And these young people aren't any different. So let me ask you this. What was one thing you started teaching? Last year was your first year, right?
Yeah.
So last year was your first year. What was the first, oh my gosh, what in the world? Like, just something, what was the first thing that happened and you were just blown away?
Well, it was the very, very first day.
Oh boy.
The very first day I walk into Thomas Jefferson, and Thomas Jefferson Middle School is in southern, south of the Watterson, in kind of the Newburgh area, on Poplar Level Road. But it's an old high school. So it's huge. I mean, we've got 1,000 students. And so what we do every morning is all the kids meet up in this gym. I mean, it's packed. And I walk in, and I was a college basketball player. I'd heard, big crowds, but I walk into this gym and it is like I'm walking into a concert, and those concerts, it's so loud, man. I'm just, oh my gosh. And all of a sudden, two kids are darting right at me. I mean, they're going to collide with me, and I kind of braced for myself, and they like split, right before. I said, this is chaos. So I just looked at there and said, my God, what have I done? So that was my first day.
Sure.
And that it's just, this mass of humanity. But, in that same week though, I was having trouble. I'm just going to be honest with you. I mean, I thought I was going to have nervous breakdown about every, and I couldn't show it to the kids, but sometimes.
So what about that? Because there's going to be some first year teachers that are going to listen to this. So I think there's a couple of things to note. And I'm big on mental health. I'm big on, I come from rough neighborhood, other side of the tracks. I've had a gun pulled on me 3 times in my life. I'm a very hardened, rough around the edges. I played basketball. Same thing. I'm 6'6". I'm a big guy. But, this narrative for men especially, and I mean, I think all people deal with it, but for men especially, there's this narrative of if you talk about mental health, you're weak, or if you go to a therapist, you're weak, or, if you ask for help, you're weak. And here's the reality of it. 2020, we know that everybody has mental health. You either have good mental health or you have bad mental health. It's like cardio. It's like anything else, right? You either can go out and run a 5K or you pass out after the first mile, right? So where I want to backtrack a little bit, because I think it is important, not just for men, but definitely men, because it's not something. So there's going to be some first year, second year men who are teachers who are going to be in this exact same boat as you, who don't have the combat experience, who don't have the military experience, but they're going to be sitting there, and the bell's going to ring and the door's going to close, and they're going to be sitting in the room by themselves. And in their mind, they're going to be thinking, damn, what have I got myself into? So how did you get to that point? Because I don't think it's not something naturally, it doesn't sound like was always there. So if you don't mind.
No. Shane, this is a wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much for doing this, because this is helping me also process some of the things as I get ready to go to NTI, because I've spent an entire summer plus reflecting on, what I did. Because I did some things that I regret, because I didn't know, but I've had this time to reflect on it, and I had I've got a whole new plan. But it gets back to exactly what you said, Shane, is that nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I am going to mess something up. I'm going to go out there and try to just do bad, because nobody does that. Every parent wants the best for their child, and every child inside them is a successful human being that just wants to have the opportunity to get out. So every time I get in the classroom, and near the end, before we had to go to NTI, I was getting to that point. But there were times when I just shut down. I was one day I had my arms crossed, and I was just overwhelmed. And then finally, one of my students, and she was, I'm not going to say her name, but just loved this little girl. I mean, she was a little demon sometimes. And then finally, she raised her hand. She did the right hand. I said, hey, thank you for raising your hand. What question you have? She says, Mr. Colonel Johnson, can I just give you a hug? And she got up and she wrapped her little, and I said,
but that goes back. Like, people can see it, right? Like we're not, like we've all been that. We've all been there. We've all been in an environment, and you see a guy and you're like, man, that guy's having a rough day. And I don't think, again, and I'm not being sexist. I'm using men, because men stereotypically have harder of a time addressing their emotions. And in order to actually truly deal with your mental health, you've got to be able to understand your emotions, and you've got to I understand why. I've got friends who went and were deployed multiple times, who had platoons, and people passed away and died in combat, and they're open and talking about it. And I understand why there's a part of you had to learn how to shut some of that out, right? It's a survival instinct in a lot of ways. You can't be in battle and bullets flying at you and grenades flying at you, and having no idea who's who has you down sight right now. And you can't be emotional and be upset and be in your feelings in that moment. So I do understand that. Where did you get, or what are some things that helped you get through to a point to where I'm not in touch with my emotions and my mental health isn't great, to now I'm able to do that? Because I think I watched one of your talks, and I think some of it has to do maybe with your family and your wife. So if you want to share some of that.
Yeah, I thank you for, because I do want to address this, and it applies not only to new teachers and how we address our mental health and the importance of self-care, but I do want to talk about that time after I was arrested and I was charged with DUI, and I spent that night in jail. I got up the next, spent that night and finally got out, and I called my wife. And my wife, before I could even say anything, she says, "You are either going to therapy now, or you'll never see me or your daughter again." She says, "It's done." Now, my wife is a PhD. She's the director of behavioral health at Fort Knox. She is a psychologist. She treats soldiers with PTSD, and she knows this business, and she harbors a lot of guilt now that she didn't see this coming. But she had been telling me, Fred, you've changed. You changed when you got back from Iraq. You got worse when you got back from Afghanistan. And I said, "No, I got no problems," but it took that life-changing event to wake me up. And it took, possibly losing my family to say, okay, I've got to get help, and I got to do it for real. And that's when my mental priority shifted from everything to my mental health. So I went to, I got therapy. I stayed in therapy for a very long time, 3 years. I was on medication for a very long time. And I credit, not only my wife and that police officer that, that saved me from myself, but behavioral health specialists have saved my life. I had, Cindy Raminger. I can name all the PhDs and social workers that worked with me. I credit them with keeping me alive and giving me the tools that I needed, and that I ended up using a lot once I went into the classroom. Now, times I failed. I'm not going to be honest with you. You can't do it every. I did my best.
Sure.
But I also do yoga. I do mindfulness. I do meditation. My wife's has a company that she does with consulting called Be Awe Inspiring. That's about mindfulness. So I'm learning a lot from her.
Okay.
With that. But mental health is I can talk all day and have nothing but incredible praise for behavioral health, mental health professionals.
Absolutely. So what was that like? Because I've got a therapist. I go and deal and it's something that I'm 40, and it's something that I definitely advocate for. Especially a lot of my friends who happen to be men. I tell them, hey, by the time you're 40, go and just schedule, 6 or 7 sessions, right? Because look, the first session you go in there, you're not going to give anything up. You're going to have this wall up. You're going to feel like you're being judged, and you're not going to say, what you want to say. And it takes a couple of sessions to really peel back, the layers to the onion, if you will. And I think it's huge, especially for teachers, men and women, to be, if you don't have a natural ability to be able to kind of talk out kind of what's going on with your spouse, or if you don't have a spouse, it's really good to have somebody to, even if you don't think you have anything wrong, even you don't have to be suicidal. You don't have to be an addict. You don't have to be any of these things. It's almost like having a safety net, right? It's like it.
Yeah, it's like having safety. It's like having a coach. I look at my therapist as a coach, and she was. I've had several, but the most effective. I mean, she gave me tools in my toolbox. She helped me sharpen my saw. Just like when you're a soldier, you have to practice. How to use your weapon. You have to practice hand-to-hand combat. How to throw grenades. That requires practice, but it also requires a coach. And it's a skill that you learn over time. Now, there's some people that are blessed with it, just like some people are really great at math or great at mechanics. Well, some people are naturally, calm and can control. Well, I'm not one of those people. I'm a very, excitable,
high strung. You're a high strung guy.
I'm a high strung dude, man. And you know what? When I was in combat, I was pretty good. Because that got me through. Because I could take risk. I could do things. But when you come back, that's not necessarily how life is. You can't react to everything. So what my therapist did was they gave me through, cognitive behavioral, the techniques that they provided was, okay, stop, think. Okay, Fred, you're starting to get angry. Okay, stop, think. Why are you angry? And then there's, philosophies like Stoicism and, just different religion, and those things help you, but you've got to use those tools. And my therapist was my coach. And that's how I looked at it. Everybody needs a coach.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, it's not. It is the stigma of it being a weakness. It is not a weakness, and it is definitely one of those things that I think most people go to and they think, "Man, I should have done this 10 years ago," or whenever, right? Because it just allows you to have a quality of life better than what you have. Again, even if things are okay, we all have trauma, right? Like not everybody has the childhood that I had. Not everybody goes to combat and is deployed on foreign soil. So, everybody has, we all have a trauma, right? You go through a bad breakup, or you go through a divorce, or, your relationship gets frayed with your kids, and, whatever, like there is trauma is, and this even as teaching, one person's normal day is another person's, nightmare, right?
Absolutely.
So it's an amazing thing. So So what are some things that you learned or you carried over from the military into the classroom that you have found to be effective?
Well, it's really interesting you brought this up. One of the things, and it actually started whenever I was a high school basketball player in Centralia. One of my coaches and teachers just passed away Tuesday. Coach Jeff Carling, one of the most influential people in my life. He was a coach and a teacher. And one of the things that he made us do, and I started knowing, I knew him when I was 12 years old, about the age of the kids that I'm teaching. And he had us memorize this poem. And it goes like this: if you think you can, you can. If you think you dare not, don't. If you think you'd like to win, but think you can't, it's almost a cinch you won't. For all through this world, you'll find success begins with a person's will. It's all in the state of mind. So, being a part of a team, you're an athlete. That was when I first recognized the importance of building self-esteem and confidence in myself and the people that I worked with. And that carried over into the military, because there's no greater team sport in the world than being a combat infantryman, and going out and doing that work. So what I bring into the classroom is one, that idea of positive thinking. And again, what you're doing with accepting the challenge, creating that culture in the classroom where the kid has the confidence that I can do it, and when you're a warrior, I mean, you can't go into war and say, hey, maybe I'll win. You go in there and say, hey, man, I'm going to do this thing, right? Sure. And I'm going to do it with my brothers and sisters. So what I'm trying to bring into the classroom is create that culture, one, that we all have greatness inside of us, and that we are going to explore every angle to let that greatness, blossom. But also that we've got to do it together, and that we are our team, and that we have to lean on other people. Just like you're talking about a therapist, we have to work with one another. And it breaks my heart, the divisiveness that we have in our nation right now. And I have an opportunity, I believe, as a teacher, like all teachers, to make a positive impact on, one child a day. You do that, 40 weeks, how many days do we do this? 154 days. I can impact every child in my class, but to do it in a positive manner, to do it with positivity and create the culture of, that we all have greatness inside of us, and we can realize that greatness by working together.
Yeah. And I think you hit on it, definitely not to get into politics, but, yeah, I mean, the divisiveness that is out there, the negativity that is coming from the leadership part of it is really unfortunate. And I guess it's unfortunate for me because that's not what I feel is what America is. So for you to be able to be in there and change that, or help reinstill that narrative of, I mean, even what we're seeing with, a resurgence of speaking out and, things, racial inequality and these different things. I mean, you've obviously been on earth a little bit longer than myself. But I've never seen as many white people speaking out and showing it. So I don't think it's not as much like when we as adults speak out against wrong, right? No matter what it is. If someone is being slighted, if someone is being felt, devalued or disenfranchised or told they're not worthy as much as this person, or even if it's implied, right? Even if it's not, directly stated, when someone who looks like that same person steps in and says, hey, you know what? I'm here to help you, and this is wrong. It leaves a lasting mark that says, oh, maybe that is wrong, and maybe there is good, or maybe there is, there is right. And that truly is, to me, one of the greatest gifts that teachers have. I'm not a huge fan of our academic system as a whole, as a system as it sits. but like anything, it has a lot of failures and a lot of holes, and it could be massively improved in different ways. I actually think the most value out of your elementary, middle school, and high school years actually comes out of the influence of the adults that you're passing in the hall every day, that you learn from, and can kind of grow from. I tell a story that I was, life wasn't the greatest, especially in elementary school. And back then, these kids don't, know about it now, but back then you had chalkboards, right? So you had the chalkboard, and well, you had the erasers. Well, I didn't know this at the time, and since a lot of people don't know this, I never really thought how they clean the erasers. So in the janitor's room, they had this huge contraption. It was like a vacuum, and you would run the eraser across it, and it would suck the chalk out of it so that you could keep reusing it, right? So it would go through. So the janitor came to me one day. He would come around and pick up the trash out of the classrooms at the end of the day. And every now and then he would say, does anybody want to help? And the teacher would either say, yes, free to go. Well, me, I was always looking for a reason to get out of class. I didn't want to be there. School was not for me. I mean, I ended up graduating high school 154th out of 187 with a 1.6 GPA. School was not for me. I just did not want to be there. So he got to be where he would take me out and come get me. And he was actually the first person in my educational journey. We were walking the hall one day and collecting erasers and collecting trash, and it got to be a fairly regular thing at the end of the day. And, we were walking, and he just I think he could tell, right? He could just tell, and he looked at me, and he was a black guy, and he looked at me, he said, "Oh, buddy," he said, "I just want you to know me and you ain't that much different." And I said, "Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Satterfield. Thank you." And it was like this weird thing of does he know what's going on in my house? Do I say something? Do I not say something? It was that weird thing. I never actually discussed it with him. A really cool piece to that story is when I got to high school. So I played varsity as a freshman. We only had one senior. We had a really, really good high school. We only had one senior my freshman year. His son was our senior that year, and who has now become a friend of mine. So it's kind of a wild thing, but just that acknowledgement and just that time, I felt like I was helping. I felt like I was a part of something. It allowed me, it gave me something to look forward to in the day. It was something that he probably despised doing at times because it was his job and he had to go do it. For me, it was, man, I love this. I want to, this is cool. I get to go do this. Or it's loud. This thing was unbelievably loud, and you would run the erasers across, and the vacuum was so hard, it would literally pull the chalk out of these felt erasers. And it's those type of interactions where, again, you went through it a year, your year was kind of interrupted and cut short. This year obviously is a whole nother animal and beast, but, I hope that teachers, just around the world know that simple interaction, that simple acknowledgement of, hey, it's going to be okay. Right. Hey, I get it. It just matters. It really does matter.
Yeah. And it's, you said a bunch of very interesting things that, that we could talk about for another 4 or 5 hours, just in that little story that you told. But, I want to go back to what you started with this idea of equity and racial equity in our school systems. And one of the things that I love about JCPS, Jefferson Community Public Schools, county public schools, is that racial equity is one of the imperatives. And that's a very important part of what we talk about at my school, particularly given the most of our students are students of color.
Yep.
Is that, not talking about it has caused the problems that we're at right now. So I make it even last year, I was very intentional in class that that we had at least once a week. We would talk about a leader or a personality from history who was black or brown person that that contributed, whether it was Obama, whether it was Gandhi, whether it was Mandela, whoever it was, or somebody like Hannibal or Mansa Musa from history. Because you look at how I grew up. When I grew up as a kid in middle school, it was all white people, and we know that ain't true. We know that isn't true. So part of my charter is in making sure that this proper history, and the history of people of color are talked about, and our students know that the Fertile Crescent, the cradle of civilization, those were brown people, and Egypt, black people, our writing, science was created by black people.
Yeah,
most of my kids don't know that. They said, "What are you talking about, Mr. Johnson?"
Yeah.
Oh, well, Johnson, that's no. And when you see the look on their face, the recognition, and that's part of a really important part of what I do, particularly at the school that I go to.
That's
and I'm
awesome.
blessed to work at Thomas Jefferson Middle School. Is equity and equality are not the same. Equality, everybody gets the same. Equity, everybody gets what they need.
Yep.
And that is what we have to provide kids who don't always have the best situation, what they need to be successful. And that's kind of my why. Why I go to school every morning.
That's awesome.
Is be a part of that.
That's awesome. I may need to have you on. So I've got another podcast that I do called the Not So Difficult, Uncomfortable Conversation, and it started back when the George Floyd thing happened. So I do it with a very, very close friend of mine, a guy named Alex Todd. He's a pastor.
I watched. Yeah, I watched that. It was
So it's we've not had anybody from the military on, and I think I'll talk to you about it off camera here, but I think I'd like to have you on because you're right. We don't. So it goes back to even mental health. We don't talk about it, right? We don't like it. So I actually believe that in America, that's what we have. That's actually what we have. We actually have a silent epidemic, right? It is an epidemic of silence. Like we don't talk about, now I've been fortunate enough. I've got a good friend of mine who teaches up in Clark County, Indiana, just across the river there. He and I have been, we literally communicate every day via text and have since, all of this, kind of happened. And, sometimes it's just, talking trash back and forth to each other about politics or, about sports. And then sometimes it's, hey man, how are you doing? Like, he's a teacher. Right. He's a teacher. Like, are you okay? We've got to do that. Right.
Absolutely.
Like, and we've got to, we've got to have those conversations. We've got to have the difficult, uncomfortable conversations. The unfortunate part about it is, and I had a conversation last night with with two friends that I grew up with, and speaking on racism, white people are the ones who have to fix racism. People of color aren't going to fix it. If they were going to fix it, and it's not that they're incapable, it's not their problem. They're not the ones with the issue. And it's white guys who speak up when their friend makes the off-color joke, or when grandpa says something, or when dad says something, and that's how we end it. So,
and I spent, I tell you, Shane, is I spent a good part of my summer reading, so I read all of Ibram Kendi's, How to Be an Anti-Racist, stamped from the beginning. I read White Fragility, the present day Jim Crow. I forgot the name of that, but try to understand it. Because people aren't willing to do the work. One, here's the problem. And I think, and I love my superintendent who said that racial equity is the moral and ethical imperative of our time. People are not willing to do the work. And, and that is to study history, to study with an open mind. We have to be deprogrammed a lot based on, just like I said, when I grew up, there were no black people in, other than Crispus Attucks maybe, or Booker T. Washington. We didn't study black history. And so we don't have an idea of what systemic structural racism means. That we have a population of 15% black people, but a prison population of 40%. Well, why is that? Well, you look at the war on drugs and crime, and we can go on all day about that.
Yeah.
But it's part of understanding our history. But first, accepting that there is a problem. Einstein said, if I was given an hour to save the world, I would spend 59 minutes trying to figure out the problem and a minute on the solution. And we just got to admit that there's a problem, and that's the big part of this. And
having that empathy to want to understand and acknowledge, like, hey, there's an issue. So I will say kudos for you for actually educating. Because I would venture to say that most people, especially white people under 35 years old, don't even know what Jim Crow is. They don't know, any of those things. So the fact that you're involving those things in your curriculum and in what you're teaching, I think is awesome. And because again, it goes back to, I can't even imagine. I can't. And I think this is relative to, to the audience and to the topic. I can't imagine being a kid sitting in class and hearing all about history and all about all these I'm being told all these great things and great people and everybody else, and none of them look like me.
Right.
And I can only imagine psychologically what that does. I travel a lot. So my previous company that I founded, I grew to expand 50 some different countries around the world, and I would develop partnerships with multinational governments. And China is one of the places that I massively enjoyed going to. And when you go to China, you are a minority as a white American, right? And not even so. I went to Shanghai, so I worked with the Minister of Education there in Shanghai, and I'll never forget. I'm a big guy, like I'm a big. I'm big for American standards. I stick out, here. So I go there, and there's an area in Shanghai. You go across the river, and it's called the Bund. And you go over in the Bund, it's all this futuristic buildings and lights, and it's massively different than downtown Shanghai. And you go over, and you get off this little tram thing, and you're walking around, and I'm in awe. I'm walking around and taking pictures, and this guy walks up, and he kind of making a motion to take a picture. Well, again, me being the nice guy that I am, I was like, yeah, I'll take your picture. I thought he wanted, me to take a picture of him and his family. So I said, I greeted him in his native language. I told him yes. And all of a sudden, about 30 guys, they're hanging on me, standing up behind me, flexing, thumbs up, like this whole big thing. And it took me back a little bit because I'm big on personal space, but I'm a hugger. If I know you and I care about, I'll give you a hug. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? These guys are laying down in front of me, posing, and this guy's taking pictures. And I finally dawned on, like, they just assumed I was somebody important because there wasn't anyone else around that looked like me. They definitely were not as tall and as big as I was. I've got the facial hair, the whole bit. They were like, hey, who is this guy? But so I know kind of what that feels like to be there, but I can't imagine living every day of my life and not even being given the truth or the facts to what it is. So, kudos for you for doing that. Let me ask you this. What was the first heartbreaking moment for you as a teacher? Or did you have one? Have you had one yet?
There's been no tragedy per se. Now, we did have two students at our school. They were not in my class who passed away in an accident. I'll leave it at that. So they weren't in my class. The personal tragedies that I experienced is more of recognizing that I might have done harm, and that bothers me a lot. even now.
It sounds to me like, and I'm not analyzing you by any stretch of the means, but there's definitely a narrative coming from you of you're kind-hearted and you care, and you care about making a positive impact. I think that's what even went back even into the military days. So it sounds like that's where, hey, I'm consciously aware of how I make someone else feel.
Yeah, it's that I think I am fortunate to have gained over time, for various reasons, a higher level of empathy. Based on just how I was raised in some ways, but really what I've learned in the military. And I love your story about Shanghai and how you greeting Chinese people with their own language and their own culture, being culturally aware.
Sure.
Now that was really reinforced in the military for me. Especially one of my last combat assignments, I was an advisor to the Afghan army. And so, I learned Dari, I learned a little bit of Pashto, I learned the customs, and it actually saved my life. And I tell a story of when I do moth storytelling. I told a story on stage one time about the name of the story is The First Time I Kissed a Man, and that story was when way you greet once you know somebody's kissing both cheeks, and I got to know this guard who eventually gave me information that saved my life, but it was because of the relationship we built with one another. So, that was just another example of, inclusion and empathy being a superpower. I think empathy is the superpower in terms of personal relationships, specifically.
So I've got a similar story that I can relate to give you some context. So while I didn't kiss a man, it certainly felt like that was what's going to happen. So actually back here, you'll see a sign here, and this sign says Kia Kaha. Now, you being a basketball guy, I'll actually show this to you. So this is actually a New Zealand, their Olympic national team. This is their jersey, and they've all signed it there. So one of the countries that I worked very, very closely with is New Zealand. And so their Olympic head coach is actually one of my best friends, Piero Cameron. He's in the FIBA World Hall of Fame. Yeah. So Kia Kaha means stay strong, right? So it has a special meaning to me from the people there. And you're right, learning, and this relates into the classroom, learning to relate and communicate and speak their language. Because everybody, listen, I'm sure like in your household, you guys have inside jokes and weird names for something because that's how the kids pronounced it when they were little, and you just kind of, called it that. But over there, so the traditional Māori, the Māori indigenous people there in New Zealand, if you ever get a chance to go, it is an unbelievable place to go. It is easily, it's a magical place. It is one of the few places you'll ever visit, and just traveling around will bring you to tears. Well, their tradition and traditional elders in their community, it's not uncommon for them. I can't remember the name of it, and I'm pissed at myself that I can't remember, but to have facial tattoos and to have tribal tattoos on their face.
Yeah.
It just in normal, normal world, right? These guys have regular jobs, and they have something called a hungi. And a hungi is a greeting, and I actually didn't know what it was. Everybody knows the haka, and they've seen him do, they see him do the haka. Of all the things that I knew, I did not know what a hungi was. And this guy who can look eye to eye to me, I'm 6'6", he walks up and he shakes my hand, he pulls me in. I'm thinking, okay, we're hugging, cool. He's greeting me, saying some nice things, and he places his forehead and his nose to my forehead and my nose.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh man, what? So it's like, okay, this is obviously some sort of traditional thing that they do. And he pulled back and we talked for a minute. And I said, I got to interrupt you. I need a little bit of context to what that was. And what it was, and they've shared, and I'm sure it has different meanings in different ways. But a lot of it has to do with that is their way of greeting someone that means a lot to them, and you're exchanging the breath of life by doing that.
Yeah, I love
that. You talk about warriors. Their culture is very warrior. Yeah, it is Absolutely. An amazing place, and I hope you and I actually carry on a relationship after this, because I think we're definitely on the same wavelength with some of this stuff, and I'd love to share some of it with you. But that matters with these kids. It matters. Squatting down and looking at them eye to eye when you talk to them, and getting in and just being able to speak, that language with them. So, couple more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. What is something that you wish you knew going into the classroom that you now know that maybe a first-time teacher that's listening maybe might not know, and now all of a sudden they're about to walk into their first day, and you're able to give them a heads up?
Yeah, well, that's thank you for that question. Whenever I decided to be a teacher, I had in my mind, I'd seen all the movies, the one with Robin Williams, I forget the name of it, but of going into a classroom and having this immediate connection with the students, doing these incredible, projects, and have these Dead Poet Society, that was the one, these credible connections. And, I knew in my mind, because, I didn't go to teacher school, so I didn't, learn, I didn't student teach. I mean, I literally went from being a senior consultant at this company, and a week later I was in the classroom with other than looking at some YouTube videos. Didn't know about classroom management, but I thought, hey, I know how to deliver content. I know social studies because I've lived it. I've got maps all over my, house. I got globes. Yeah. I know this. Well, you know what? Knowing content is a fraction of what teaching is about. And if I knew that, okay, how was I going to build relationships? Because I know relationship building is important. I mean, I had to do it in Afghanistan, Iraq, every place that I've been in the military. It's just as important in the classroom. Building that relationship and those cultures, the connections with the kids is the most important. And I didn't really get to do it because I jumped right in, because I started school about this time, 3 weeks in. So I didn't get to do any of the relationship buildings. I just, one day I walk into a classroom, the substitute's there. Hey, it's all yours, Mr. Johnson. And boom, and I'm saying, oh my God. So if I knew, and that's why I'm excited to get back to in-person teaching, and it's going to be interesting how I can do this online, is that engagement, is building that relationship with the students. And not being too nice, being too mean, but it's like giving them what they need, being that teacher. So if I, as a new teacher, if I was to give any advice, is that no, you are going to mess up. You are going to do but you are also going, the days where you make a positive connection, embrace them, put your arms around them and say, this is what it's about, and strive to do that every day. But you're going to mess up. Brene Brown, who's one of my heroes, has this.
Oh, great speaker. I've seen her in person. She's big time.
Amazing. And, and she says, grace is when your mistakes serve a purpose instead of serving shame. And, every day, okay, you make a mistake. Okay, your purpose is to make a difference in that child's life. Make it right. You made a mistake, fix it. Okay. And just give yourself grace every now and then. And that's what I have to tell you, because there's going to be days. I'm a grown combat veteran, been shot at, blown up. There were days I had to go leave the classroom, at breaks, and go cry. No kidding. Yes,
yeah.
You're old man. So hey, it's going to happen, y'all.
Sure.
Embrace it. Embrace.
Sure. Did you have any teachers that you've taught with that were there to kind of lend some good advice? Or
Thomas Jefferson, I can't speak more highly of this school, has an incredible mentorship program. So I had Miss Carrie Ann Ransdale ran this program called TJ 101, where all the new teachers got together every Friday of all times, right? After school, and we talked and worked with one another. Dr. Ashley Forrest was my mentor, she, I was in the Army, and the Army prides itself on a mentor program. Yeah. I have never been given more and better mentorship than I have in education at the school that I go to. And one of my assistant principals was John Rock, who's also Major Rock in the National Guard. So not only is he a National Guardsman, he's also an assistant principal at school. Amazing man. So yeah, I had incredible.
That was good. So he was able to kind of speak your language.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he was key for me, because he also knew my background with the challenges I had with mental health. And I would come into him. I say, hey man, I'm not feeling really resilient today, Mr. Rock. I'm. And he would say, okay, just do what do what you do. You take the deep breaths, you get yourself right, get yourself back in there, get back in the fight, jump back on that horse and get it right. And, and so I'm very blessed, the mentorship and that I've received at Thomas Jefferson is some of the best in the world.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's great to hear that you've had such a positive experience on such a unique transition into teaching and literally being thrown in the middle of the fire with that. So, I want to ask a fun question here, because it's one of those things, we've talked a lot about about some serious stuff, but I think we can kind of break it up. So 2 questions. One, is there a book that you would recommend, that you have read, that you would recommend to teachers outside of your own? We're definitely going to plug your book, and we're gonna put your book out there. But one that you've read that you thought, man, if other teachers would have read this, man, it would make a difference.
I'm trying to look for it. I don't see it in my. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to turn like that. But
no, you're okay.
I had it with me. Well, I can't find it. But it's the book that probably influenced me the most. And this is an author that is it's by Pat Conroy. Wrote a book called The Water is Wide. And it's about Pat Conroy is I think one of the greatest writers of all time. He wrote Prince of Tides, Great Santini, just a brilliant writer. He was also a college basketball player at the Citadel. And he wrote The Water is Wide, which is about him coming out of the Citadel. He went into the Peace Corps. That didn't work out. And he started teaching in a very similar manner that I did, is, right in kind of the middle of it, in an all-black school on an island off the coast of Charleston.
Oh, wow.
Mackinac Island, I think it is.
Yep.
And so that book talks about not only, the experiences that he had and, and with those kids, but also some of the challenges that he had reckoning his work as a teacher with the administration. Because I'll tell you, one of the dangers you can get in as a teacher is you start questioning. There's know-it-alls are everywhere. Hey, the bottom line is your bosses are trying to do the best they can, and it may not be perfect. Well, so he talks about not only his connections and relationships with the students, but also his working with the administration and that. But it was one of his first books. It was his first big book. But it's The Water is Wide by Pat Conroy, and it will inspire you to want to be a teacher. I mean, I've read it probably 3 times.
Awesome. So the last one, I will be a unique to you. It sounds like have you traveled the world outside of your service? Did you get to see the world outside of your service?
Yeah. Well, most of it was service related. I mean, so, I had the combat deployments, but also, I was in Germany, Croatia. I think I've been in 25 different countries.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And my family, my wife and daughter, my daughter is getting ready to she's in a job at the University of San Francisco, but we try to have experiences, instead of giving presents, we give experiences.
Yep.
And our experiences are built around, travel. Last year we went to St. Lucia. We go to places for those experiences, and
That's
not
awesome.
only other countries, but also within the United States. And so this not this next summer on break, I'm gonna through hike the Cherokee Trace, which is in the Daniel Boone National Forest here in Kentucky. So it's 333 miles for that experience. And man, I don't know if I can do it or not. I'm kind of gotten back and out of shape and all that, but
so I'm a little bit familiar with it. So I played a year of junior college basketball over in Jackson, which is in Breathitt County, over in Eastern Kentucky, in that part of the world. And I would tell you that it is some rough terrain. It is some rough terrain over there. Man, that's awesome to hear about your travel. I'm a big fan of it. I say the same thing. Spend your money on experiences. I've been blessed enough to travel around the world, and a majority of my best friends now reside in other countries. So this whole lockdown,
exactly. My dad passed away about a little over a year ago, and one of the things he used to tell me as a kid, he says, son, it's not the amount of money you got, it's not the amount of toys, it's the stories that you can tell. That's what makes you rich. And the only way you can do the stories is doing what you do, accepting the challenge, getting out there, being the man in the arena, being the person in the arena. If you've ever read Teddy Roosevelt's great speech on the man in the arena, it's not.
I'll check it out though.
Oh no, you got it's not the man in the it's not the critic to count. It's the man in the arena, the one that's bloodied and marred, but he knows defeat and victory, whereas the coward will never know. The coward dies 1,000 deaths, that kind of thing.
Sure,
but
sure.
Oh, check that out because it fits right into what you're doing here, Shane. The Man in the Arena by Teddy Roosevelt. That speech is exactly what you're doing. With accepting the challenge. You've got to put yourself in the arena.
I appreciate that. This really kind of all came about. I've actually given 300 plus talks on 4 different continents and. Traveled around a lot, and I've actually transitioned out of the entrepreneur world. I did that for 10 years, and I got acknowledged in 2018 as emerging entrepreneur by the Kentucky Entrepreneurs Hall of Fame. And I've got kids going to college, kids not even in school yet, and I've got it all over the place. And I kind of transitioned in January and February to go into speaking full time. I'm in the process of trying to write my first book. That is a chore in itself. But
I could help you with that too. I mean,
I think selfishly, I definitely want to continue this conversation off. But I kind of made that transition, and then COVID happens, and then now I'm not speaking. The whole goal was to be, out at school speaking and giving talks and doing those things, and now, that's all kind of shut down. But I love being able to access and provide, provide insight and share and information and give you guys spotlight for what you do, even more so what you do from your time, in the military. It's a great thing. Your servant, process in your life obviously is there by, your story and giving, serving your country, serving the guys who served under you. A lot of people don't know that about the military. It is very servanthood driven. Now serving, young people in your community. Are you ready? So when did you move to Louisville before you became a teacher, or?
Whenever I retired out of Fort Knox. Where you're from. So I retired out of Fort Knox. My wife still works there as the director of behavioral health. And so it's funny. We were I was deployed to Afghanistan, and my wife says, "Hey, I think I found a house." And I said, "Hey, the only thing I'm going to ask you to do is got to be near Cherokee Park." And she says, "Well, I'm just going to tell you I bought it and it's right on Cherokee." So I get to go out my door and so
that's awesome.
I didn't have to say anything.
That's awesome. So look, Fred, I can't thank you enough, for coming on and sharing your story, your journey, in what we're doing. So, means a lot. It means a lot. I appreciate what you do as an educator. Obviously, massively appreciate, the time that you gave, for our freedoms and our ability to be divisive and argue and gripe and complain about so much. I think sometimes that gets lost too, even in this whole debate. I heard a Navy SEAL say the other day, he was talking to a group that were offended, who were not military folks, who were offended about this whole kneeling at the anthem and this, that, and the other. And he said, look, I actually look at that and I smile, because that's the actual greatest respect you can actually show to the flag, is protest it, because that is exactly what I did.
I'm part of that team too. Everybody says, hey, you want to thank me? Hey, think somebody's got the courage to stand up and protest and say, hey, this is not right. Now, those are the heroes of today, are the people that are saying, no more. We ain't doing this anymore.
Well, it's like you talked about, we talked about race and speaking out. Somebody said it best, whatever, especially during this time and when it all happened, whatever you're doing right now is exactly what you would have done during the Martin Luther King days and the Jim Crow days. So if you're sitting at home and it's no big deal, you don't put on like it would have been. If you're out or you're doing things, or you're sparking conversation, that's what you would have been then.
Yeah, I know we're almost out of time, but to that end, I don't know if might want to write down this name, Matthew Kaufman. He was the Kentucky Teacher of the Year. And he's a teacher at Moore High School here in Louisville, and he was arrested protesting with his students. He has done massive work with.
Is he the one who? Is he the one that was arrested like in the middle of the road, like Yeah. Okay, I saw the video. Yeah, I saw the video.
Yeah, so he might want to reach out to him. I don't think he's on LinkedIn. But maybe I don't know if I have his contacts, but he's definitely somebody.
I'm sure I can connect with him.
Yeah, because he is, like I said, Teacher of the Year. He is, he's kind of become sort of my role model. He had his students write a book, and they published a book together. He's kind of, he's kind of a hero of mine,
That's awesome.
In work.
That's awesome. Look, Fred, thank you for taking. Look, I know it's a hectic time. I know school's starting next week, and you're all over the place and trying to get. I definitely want to stay in touch with you outside of this interview. You seem like an absolute jewel of a human, and I have a saying: when you find good people that are out here and they're willing to do good and are doing good, you keep those people close to you and you keep them around. So, thanks so much for sharing your story. Diving in and being transparent and being authentic. It really, really means a lot. And I appreciate you coming on today.
Well, I appreciate you and accepting the challenge, Shane. Thank you very much for the opportunity, man. It was great. It was awesome. Awesome. Well spent hour and 10 minutes, however long it's been.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, sir, brother. Thank you.